what else am I say, like, okay, let's say I do argue that we shouldn't have kids at all, because yeah, but why would that wouldn't further society, that wouldn't help us out in any way.
Also, Paradise was supposed to be here. I think Paradise wanted to stop by and have a chit chat about something. Oh yeah, here we go. Here Paradise is. What's up, Paradise? You're on air.
All right, what's up?
Ooh, your microphone's not that great, dude.
I'm sorry if my mic quality is bad, then that's on me. I'll take the L on that.
Yeah, dude. I don't know. Like, what are you using to like communicate? Are you using like a 1930s radio or some shit?
Yeah, dude, I'm getting into my arc. You see, not I'm just kidding. I can't. You're on Twitch. All right, no, don't worry.
Okay, my dude. Okay. All right. So yeah, what do you want to talk about?
All right, abortion is my strongest stance, so why not?
All right, dude. What are your problems with my stance on abortion? Let's start with that.
All right, can you lay them out, because I haven't really I've heard you talk about it sometimes, but I don't know where you really stand on it. So,
All right, well, it seems to be that having a conscious experience is the thing that would map onto, or a conscious or sentient experience, either or pretty much interchangeably here, seems to be when we value life. This seems to map onto the way that we intuitively value life. In addition to this, I think that considering something that has yet to exist, that has never had an existence, and has never asserted a preference, seems to create a lot of moral quandaries that we can't actually resolve. And then in addition to that, I do believe that whatever seems to be like the way that we value life, or whatever qualifies personhood, seems to be outside of the grasp of a normal human being. It seems to be something that we cannot observe, so I would feel uncomfortable ever legislating that bit of morality onto somebody.
all right, so you would I saw you were against the heartbeat bill, and you find that to be like you found it to be dumb. I think that's like I mean simplest terms, but you were against that. And personally, me, I would say, because I'm more for like medical reasons would be a good justifier of it. But I would understand that a middle ground would be, of course, like, the heartbeat bill, because that would be the best way we could actually start a conversation on it. Are you still opposed to it, or?
I'm still opposed to the heartbeat bill. Yeah, I don't think it's a very well justified stance at all. I don't think a heartbeat is what gives somebody moral consideration. I think that is absolutely absurd. I don't think that's sufficient at all.
I look at it as life starts at conception. Like, that's how I
Okay, that's
personally
great.
see
Now,
it.
why would you support a heartbeat bill then?
Well, the reason why I start a heart, because, okay, at the end of the day, people who are going to be on this side are probably going to, I would want no regulation really, and want abortion to be like, free and out and about. And personal, and me, I would be on the other side. So for me, I would just support a middle ground over it be one way or the other. That's how I see it.
But that middle ground is completely unjustified. There's absolutely no place where I would ever say that anybody should be valuing life at a heartbeat. I think it's a crazy stance. Right? So, like, let's
What
say
would you,
hypothetically we were to have an entity that has no other, like, it doesn't have a conscious experience, it doesn't have sentience, but its heart's beating. Do you value that as a life?
wait, repeat. Sorry.
So, let's say we have an entity that has no conscious experience, has never had a conscious experience, it might not even ever have a conscious experience, right? And it has a heartbeat. Do we value that entity?
Now that's a fair point. That's a fair point to make. So it would never really exist, or so it would never speak anything like that. All right, I guess that's a fair. I mean, that's fair, but the difference would be in this situation is life is like developing into like a person. It's gonna turn into something. It's always gonna be there. That's what I see the difference on the situation is. Now
Okay,
I
so
get,
can we
yeah.
start, because now you're trying to like move it to a different point. So the heartbeat bill, that's what I want to talk about now because you brought up the heartbeat bill and you're asking
Yeah,
why
that's
I'm
fair.
against
That's
it,
fair.
right? So I'm against the heartbeat bill because it doesn't seem that under any moral system do we value things when they have a heartbeat. I don't think that's ever sufficient to give somebody personhood.
But what would you say? What would you say, person? So you would say consciousness, and
I believe
is
that
that what you would?
personhood would start at a conscious experience, the beginning of a conscious, the very first conscious experience, right? When something, a conscious experience, let's say, comes into existence, and then it would end at the very last conscious experience where you wouldn't have any more
Hmm. All
sentience. Yeah.
right, that's honestly like I just see it as like the moment it's concepted, it starts. I reason why I go for heartbeat is 6 weeks. 6 weeks personally is better than, like, 12 weeks, or like I just would want there to be like some sort of middle ground. And I get how you feel on it, because again, it's like, yeah, that, as you said, the entity is never actually gonna be somebody that's gonna ever like talk, speak, or do anything of the sorts. But I don't know if there's gonna be like any progress to it because I see people trying to get abortion banned, and that's ridiculous. And then I just see it seems like both sides of the aisle is just handling it to like a different degree. That's kind of ruining the conversation around it. So I get where you're coming from, but personally, I don't know what would you like suggest we should put into place? Like, what would you be advocating for? Because I feel like there should be some sort of deadline.
So I believe I have to check this exactly because it's a very complicated question, but I believe that sentience does start at I think it's the first trimester. Start to see his conscious experience develop around the end of the first trimester. I think that's, I don't know, hold up. Give me a second.
Yeah, that's fine.
I believe it's like around 22 weeks, I think at the latest.
Ooh.
I'm not exactly sure. I'd have to check this actually. Hold up. I don't know if that's correct though.
So I'm personally that's a long time, but I guess again
24
like
and 28 weeks gestation, it seems to be where consciousness arises.
hmm. I would not. I personally, I how do I put like personally, like after 1 or 2 months, like if you know you want to keep the kid, then I can understand that. But that's like, yeah, that would be like 4 months, right?
It'd be like
I think,
4 or 5 months around that is when it would come to existence, right?
yeah, that seems way too long in my personal opinion. Before,
It's okay. Why would I value it before that point?
well, I say, all right, I feel people. I'm not gonna feel like everybody who has like this thing is like brain dead. I wouldn't want to see it like that. Like if you're pregnant, you're gonna find out like after a month or two. I I mean, I get you're deciding, but after like the fourth or fifth month, you only got like 4 months left. There's no real reason to like
S-
kill the child by that point.
So you've given me absolutely no reason to value it. Do you understand that?
No reason to
No,
value it.
you
All right,
literally just went on a rambling spree of like, well, you
all
should
right,
probably have
fair,
decided
fair.
at that point. Let's say I haven't. Then why is that wrong?
If you haven't decided, I mean, but all right, okay. How do I like put this into words that
I
just
don't know.
doesn't
You tell
come
me. I
out?
don't know your
Can
stance.
I?
You've been pretty
Because
bad
like
at explaining it.
I don't want to make it into like a jumble because this is a bit complicated. Because I understand you wouldn't see it as a life, like you wouldn't see it technically as an existing being, but I see it as a human. So
Okay, why?
I see it as a human because the sperm and the egg meet. It like that's literally like the most simplest terms. It's
Okay,
yeah, it might
so
not
this is
speak to me, but
this is like complete tautology. You understand? This is just like saying I value it at this point. That's great. I don't know why you value it at that point. So, are you saying that you value like the like human development? Like that's the only thing I can think of.
well, so like the human development, like I just
Yeah, like that's the only thing I can think of. You're really bad at explaining your. I don't know how else to say it. You're just being really
because
bad at
usually
explaining
it's
it.
like I'm more to like I'm sorry, like I'm more to the argument of like where people say it's like bad, like that type of argument, like never having to go this far into it because people just usually give up before they get this far. So it's sorry, it's kind of a new territory for me. So that's why I'm a bit bad at explaining.
I mean, you told me this is your best argument
No,
stance,
I
and
mean, yeah,
you're
it's my
like,
best argument stance.
I
Like
literally
I've
just want you to explain to me like why you value it at that point. Like I understand that you value it at that point. Now why?
the reason why I value it is because I see that it's a life. It doesn't change the fact of
Why
its
is it
conscience
okay?
or
So
not.
why you value like a human being's development then? I don't know. Like we're
A human,
arguing right now. We're
a,
arguing over when something has personhood. You can't like use that it is personhood to justify that statement.
so, all right. So you say you wouldn't see it as a person, but I do.
No, I see no reason.
That's where we differ.
Do you value a person if they doesn't have conscious experience?
What would you argue on the conscience stance? Like somebody who's like in a coma, would you argue that type of consciousness, or like
No, like let's say that
because
something will never have a conscious experience again, and it's never had a conscious experience. Would you
if
value
it's
that
never
because
had,
it is a human being? Let's say a human being is like completely brain dead, will never experience consciousness again. Would you value
well
that
then
as a human
yeah.
being?
Well, on brain dead's obviously like yeah, that's different.
Well, okay, well, why is it different then? Because what
because
brain dead
that
would declare is that they're never going to have a conscious experience again. They're not going to be sentient
yeah,
again. So why is
I
that
wouldn't
different?
want anybody to. I wouldn't want anybody to live like that. I honestly would not
No,
advocate
but why don't you
for.
value it? Because you just told me you value human life, but that is a human
I
life by your
value
definition.
because
Unfortunately,
a
though, it isn't
human
going
is
to
not
experience
even a
conscious experience.
because that's not even a thing by that point. It's just like a body's there, but there's no person inside. That's
So what is
not
the person inside? What qualifies the person inside then?
okay. I guess consciousness. I mean, that's
So,
kind of like
do you
that's a,
value things when they have consciousness?
but I mean, but this is like outside of the womb. This is not like inside the womb. Now, if it was like
Who
they
cares
were
if it's
brain dead,
inside or outside the womb? Do you think that being inside or outside the womb is what qualifies life? Why would the parameters of life or like what we value human beings as change when they're outside of the womb?
all right, fair enough, fair enough. I see it as a human life. Yes, it is a human life, and I wouldn't be like I don't
Well,
value it.
well, you
But
just
I
told me
understand. But if people would want, okay, so tell me this, like if you had like
you can
some
ramble on.
accident,
We're gonna come
I
back to the exact
I
same
know
point.
you're gonna come back to it, but I'm asking a question. Like, if you were brain dead, would you want to personally live? Like, is that how
If I
you
was
would see
brain
it?
dead, I
Would
don't couldn't want anything.
you? I mean, no. I mean, all right. If I just like if something was to happen to you in that way, would you want to live in that state? Like,
I couldn't want anything at that point.
oh
It
my
would be
God, you're
brain dead.
misunderstanding
No, you're
you're missing
asking
my
me what I want in a state where I cannot want something by
no. Oh my
definition,
God,
Paradise. Like, what do
no.
you
I
want
meant
from
like
me?
okay, like let's say today you're fine, right? But then like tomorrow you get in some accident. Now, right now, answer like right now, how would you want if like it came down to somebody to determine whether you lived or died, would you want to live? Like
Would I want to live?
I mean
Probably.
that's a
I don't know what I'd want to live or not.
oh
I
my
can't
God.
want
Yeah,
anything in that state,
it's
dude.
my
Like,
question is like
are you telling me if I
my
previously asserted, so this is how I'd resolve this, okay? So if I previously stated that I wanted to be kept alive for as long as humanly possible, then that would be an experience that we could say we could value that. But I wouldn't value that after the person has become completely brain dead and has no other conscious experience, and they will never experience consciousness ever again. I would not value that at all. I would say that whatever I wanted would be completely irrelevant in this scenario. That's
all
what I would
right,
say to
fair
that.
enough. I mean, fair enough. But no, I
Okay,
just
so now I
don't
want
see
to no,
how
before you go on, because now you're trying to ramble on, we're trying to go away from the point, because I want to address this point right now. This is the point that you seem to like not be able to overcome. So you told me that you value things when they are a human life, right? But then
yeah.
whenever we brought up the idea of somebody being brain dead, you asserted that you wouldn't value them, even though
Oh,
they are
I mean,
technically a human being and they could be
I messed
considered
up. All right.
alive, right?
Then
So
I
then you
better
told me
clarify
because
my
there's no
stance
human being
then.
inside of it. And when I asked you what a human being was, you said consciousness, but there's no consciousness inside of that
Yeah, I messed up.
embryo.
I messed
So
up.
what are
Okay.
you valuing the
I'll
embryo for?
I'll just redo my argument then. I'll just redo it because okay, I do see it as a human life. I do see it as like like a human being. And yes, that they don't have consciousness anymore. That's fair. They don't have consciousness, but I don't think that takes away from them being a human being or not. I don't see
So
what that
no, we're
changes.
not arguing whether they're a human being. We're arguing personhood and when we assign the value of personhood. That's what we're arguing right now. They are probably a human being scientifically. That does not give us the answer as to whether we value them or not. And as I just asked you, you don't seem to value them even whenever they are a human being.
All right. I messed up. I said
So would
no.
you say, so there are human beings that you don't value? They are in states that you don't value. That's what I am arguing for. I'm saying you don't have any distinction between an embryo that has never experienced consciousness and a brain-dead human being. You can't draw the distinction between these two. It seems like you've never thought about this before in your life, and you're telling me this is your most, like, your strongest arguing point.
Yeah, okay, I get it. You want to go back to that? I mean,
No, that's literally what you opened the discussion with, dude.
when like no, I opened discussion. I said this is probably out of all my takes. I said this would probably be my strong because I don't want to lie to you and be like going into this and be like I know every single subject. I know
No, but
every
okay,
single
so
argument. That's not what I want to do because I'm not trying to be dishonest. So like like what did you want? That's why I said it's my strong subject because I would want to debate you on something that I knew somewhat about over debating you on nothing. I knew nothing at all. That would not make sense.
okay,
There
I'm
would be no
sorry.
point
I
in
should
debate.
rephrase that then. It seems like your strongest arguing point you haven't thought of for more than 15 seconds.
Oh my God. All right.
Because this is
I
like
mean,
the first thing that I would come up with, right? This is like the first thing that I would consider when I'm making this argument is like to try and play this out in my head. I don't know.
yeah, no. Yeah, that's fair. Okay, fair enough. All right. Okay, I guess so. Just rephrase, just put again your argument, and I'll just take the. I mean, I'm taking it out either way because I mean it's just fair. But I mean, go just explain it again. So you see, pretty much, there's not a difference between an embryo and somebody who's brain dead. But
Um,
I do see a difference there because the
I
difference
would know
between
how
like
to respond with a difference, but so I would have a response for
okay,
that, Parrot.
all
I
right,
could give you
okay, I
the
do have a response.
response. It's not my
I
job
do
to
have a
argue your
response.
standpoint. I've
I
had this
know. I'm
conversation.
trying to like
Whole
ask your stance.
Paradise.
That's not what I'm
I
trying
know
to
what
do.
you're
I'm
trying to
sorry.
ask me. I know what you're trying to ask me, buddy. I'll get to
Oh
that
my
in a second.
god,
You've already
dude.
asked it, all right? I just don't want to hear you ramble on about the same
I'm
question and
about to
restating
answer. I'm
it
about to
three
answer.
different
I can answer
times.
your question. I
Okay,
see the
okay,
difference
go on.
between
You can ramble on, and I'll just
yes.
come back to it. Okay.
All right, an embryo. The difference between an embryo and somebody's brain dead. A person who's brain dead has lived a life, and then they lost their consciousness. That means they're not. They're still a human. Yes, they are. Like as you say, like in the scientific state, they are still a human. But whenever you look at the embryo is developing. It's not always going to be stuck in that same state for the rest of its entire development. If like
Thank
if the
God.
process of
All right.
if the process of human beings was going to be like they were brain dead, then yeah, you would have an that would be a fair argument because it wouldn't make a
There
difference. It
you
would all
go.
be
You
brain
did
dead.
it. Okay. So the way that you'd say this, and you kind of stumbled over your words, but I'll rephrase it so that I can make sure I steelman your argument correctly. The way that you're arguing is that this thing has the potentiality for a conscious experience, while the other one would not have the potentiality for a conscious experience. You're valuing the potentiality of something coming into existence, even if it hasn't come into existence yet.
Yeah, pretty much.
Okay, so my problem with this stance is that it seems to be completely morally unworkable. For example, whenever we say that we should give moral credence and moral consideration to things that have never existed and have yet to exist, right? It seems that we run into a lot of moral quandaries which we cannot resolve. For example, an antinatalist argument. An antinatalist argument would assert that because we value a human being even before it's come into existence, by merely conceiving that human being, by bringing that consciousness into existence, you are violating a non-aggression principle because you know from whenever you bring that thing into existence that it will experience suffering. And because it is wrong to inflict suffering upon things that you do not have consent for, right? That would be a moral wrong. But then also we have your other premise that it is wrong to prevent a conscious experience. So while your antinatalist point would say that it's actually wrong to conceive of a child, your stance asserts that it is wrong to prevent a conscious experience. Technically, there's always a potentiality for a conscious experience. So unless we're constantly making babies, we're also committing a moral wrong by preventing that potentiality. So your system arrives at two contradictory conclusions: that it is both immoral to have a child and that you should always be having children.
I mean, what else? Wait, I say, like, okay, let's say I do argue that we shouldn't have kids at all, because yeah, but why would that wouldn't further society? That wouldn't help us out in any way. So sort of like, yeah, it is a moral wrong to like want a child, knowing that it's gonna go through like struggles and that probably gonna die, like struggles. But at the end of the day, it's still a life. Wouldn't want to just take away the aspect
Would you
of
say that
like
it's morally
birth.
wrong? Would you say that it's morally wrong to not have a child?
Personally, all right, personally, no, I would not see it as morally
No,
wrong
okay,
not to
so,
have a
so you just
child.
argued that it wouldn't give us the benefit by not having
But
that
I
child.
say,
No, okay,
but
no,
okay,
Paradise, you're gonna let me respond. You're gonna let me talk,
all right,
okay?
fair, fair, fair.
Because
That's
you
my
keep
fault.
trying to run away from this point because there's no way you can resolve this. I know that you don't know how to resolve this because we just spent like an extra 2 minutes when you were thinking of why you value an embryo over a brain dead person, right? So the
All
problem
right,
is
fair
that you
enough.
just asserted to me that we would want that conscious experience to come into existence because it would serve us some value, even if we're violating a non-aggression principle, right?
Yeah.
So
Mhm.
wouldn't that also mean that it would be morally wrong because you wouldn't be getting as much out of it to not have children? That not having children would be a morally wrong action.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, yeah, that's fair. That's fair as well.
So do you
I
think
mean,
that things like
it's
birth control, things like contraception, and things like not having children, not having like constant sex, pumping out as many babies as possible, these would all be moral wrongs because you're preventing the potentiality of a conscious experience?
I know I don't have a problem with birth control. I don't have a problem with those things.
But
So
you're
that's
preventing the potentiality of a conscious experience. Why don't you have a
but
problem
the
with that?
difference is like it would be. I would probably have more problem with like something like Plan B than I would have with birth control because birth control is
Why
taking
don't you have a problem with birth control?
birth control is like stopping something that's like not even existing yet. It's not like
Yeah, like
it's
you'd be
not.
stopping a potential conscious experience that hasn't even existed yet.
Yeah,
But you've
but
asserted,
no.
but you've asserted that we should be valuing things that have yet to exist, but have the potentiality to exist.
But you see the difference between that and this situation is with sex. It's not like the moment you like come, you're not gonna immediately just have a child form in front of you. That's not gonna happen. So like, how
What do you
can I like
mean?
if I'm
Hold
gonna
on.
okay? Let's say I want to attack birth control. I want to be like birth control is bad. Birth control is bad. But it's like it's not okay. The life has not yet existed. There was no fertilization. There was none of that. The life is not gonna exist. It wouldn't make a difference whether or not. So why would I argue birth control is bad? That's like my mindset on it. I wish
Because
like
you've made the assertion that preventing a potential conscious experience is a moral wrong. Because we
so something.
consider, because, no, you're going to let me finish. Because we consider non existent things with potentiality to exist. And then preventing that potentiality would be a moral wrong. Even if that thing has not existed yet, the potential for it to exist does exist. And by
Yeah, it
making
does.
an action to prevent that thing from existing, that would be a morally wrong action that is condemnable. So unless you also believe that not having children is a moral wrong, that unless you're making as many children as possible, that would be a morally wrong action because you are preventing potential conscious experiences, you don't seem to value potentiality other than an arbitrary point of conception.
It's just different situations, different mindsets
Why
on it.
is
It's
it
like
different? So
because
do we value
because
potentiality or do we not?
I'm not against casual sex, but I'm also not against people wanting to like value life in that regard. Like if you want to have an abortion, okay, that's one thing. But I feel like there's exceptions to abortion. Of course, there's always going to be exceptions to everything. But I feel like birth control, you're not even there's nothing there could be potential, but I'd rather people be smarter and actually plan than people just have as many kids as possible and then
You have as many
everybody
kids
has
as
a
you could
kid.
allow for, though. The
Yeah,
idea
but
that you wouldn't have a kid would be a morally wrong action. Do you stand by that statement?
no, I don't
That if
see
you
it
have
as
the
more
ability to
wrong.
have a kid and you don't have a kid, that's a morally wrong thing because you are preventing a potential conscious experience.
I don't see it as wrong. I guess that's how I put it. I
Okay,
don't
so
see
it
it.
seems so. Why do you value it then? Because we defaulted back to the reason that we value an embryo over a brain dead human being is that it has the potentiality for a conscious experience, and because of that potentiality, preventing that is equivalent to ending a conscious experience. But it seems like you don't seem to value things that have a potential conscious experience under certain situations. So what's the difference?
Well, what's
Other
the
than an
difference? Well, the
arbitrary
difference.
point of conception, what's the difference? I'm still preventing the potentiality of a human being's existence or a conscious experience.
All right, that's a fair point. Okay, so let's say I do. Okay, I'll just for the sake of being like for consistency, I'll go along with that. Okay, I will see birth control as like a form of like bad. I'll argue that stance. Okay, let's say I do see it as a form of bad. I do see that I want life to exist, but at the end of the day, I got to take into factors of is the parent actually prepared for that kid? There's a lot of
Let's say
things
the
that can
parent is
come
prepared.
into that.
So this is a
Yeah.
complete red herring. Let's say the parent is prepared to have the kid. They have the
Okay.
ability to have the
Yeah.
kid. They have the resources to have the kid. They could have the kid, and they decide not to. Is that a morally wrong action?
And with all that, if they're fully prepared to have a child and they choose not to, then yeah, I would see
That's a
that as wrong.
morally wrong action to you?
I would say moral. I don't like the use of moral,
No, we're
but
talking about
because
morality. That's what we're
I know,
talking about
I
right
know,
now. I don't know
I
if
know.
you.
I just because different moralities, different people. But all right, that's fair. I get personally. I'll just use personally instead of morally. I'll just. I would see it as a morally wrong. Yeah, it's morally wrong, but it doesn't change. All right. Yeah, I would see it as morally wrong. I guess that's what I'll say.
Okay, so now how do we resolve the idea that it is also morally wrong to aggress on another human being? And because we value the potentiality of that consciousness, that it would also be morally wrong to have a kid.
It's a separate being. I like you can argue that it's not that it can't
You
consent, that
just
it can't do all
complete
this.
this is you didn't even did you like listen to what I
Okay, sorry.
asked
Okay,
because you're
sorry. I'm
responding to
sorry.
something I
Ask it
didn't
again.
say.
Sorry.
I don't know what you're
Sorry.
trying to respond
Sorry.
to.
Okay, go again. Go again. Go again. Sorry.
So
I'm not
now
trying.
that you've
Yeah.
asserted that it
No.
is morally wrong to not have a child, right?
Yeah. Mhm.
Now, how do we resolve the idea that we have a non-aggression principle that is morally wrong to aggress on another human being? Would you agree that it's morally wrong to aggress on another human being without their consent and without them actually doing something to you?
So, yeah, I would. I would agree.
Right. So how do we resolve the conflict then that since we value the potentiality of a conscious experience, um, how do we resolve the idea that we're actually aggressing upon that potential conscious experience and then therefore it would be morally wrong to have a child because you'd be bringing it into existence while knowing you'd be causing harm, which would violate a non-aggression principle.
But I mean, yeah, yeah. I've thought of this, and I have thought of
Because
this, and I do
now,
understand because I do understand like what you're getting at. I do understand what you're getting at. Like no matter how life is conceived, it's gonna be brought into a world of harm. It's gonna have pain. That's just inevitable. And I see because it is inevitable, I don't see why that should be a factor in stopping people from having kids. It's
because
gonna happen
because
to
it wouldn't be
everybody.
inevitable if you don't have the kid. But see, the problem with your moral system is we've arrived at two contradictory conclusions. One is the idea that it is morally wrong to have a child because it would be violating a non-aggression principle, and we value the potential of that conscious experience, right, as though it were a human being, right? We can assign value to things that are yet to exist. But then also, it's morally wrong to prevent that potential conscious experience. So it's both morally wrong to have a kid and also immoral to not have a kid.
So it seems all right. All right, that's fair. That's fair.
And
Okay,
now we've
so
arrived at a contradiction in a moral.
yeah, it has. Yeah, it's that's there's no real way. I don't want to. I'm not a dishonest guy, so I'm not gonna like try to like justify that contradictory. So the reason why it contradicts in my mind in this terms of argument is because one side of it is I do want that life to have a chance at existing, but I don't want to also force people into having kids. That's just not something I would advocate for. I feel
So what's your stance then? Because you haven't been able to justify like any stance that you've taken this entire argument.
my stance is like if people choose, it's more of like irresponsibility. It's like if you know that you have the ability, like if you know that you might most likely will have a kid, if you choose not to use condoms, use anything like that, and a kid is formed, I feel like that should fall on you. And if it's like
So it's like a
by
retributivist
contraceptive
argument?
failure, so it's like if it's contraceptive failure or like rape, those exceptions I can understand. But
So it's
if
a
it's just
retributivist argument, basically.
well, transitive, can you explain that word, please?
It's the idea that you have done something wrong, therefore you ought to be punished. You ought to take responsibility. That's a
Yes, that's how
retributivist
I see.
position.
Yeah, that's how I see this.
Okay, so let's say a chain smoker smokes a pack of cigarettes every single day. Should they be allowed to have a lung transplant if it's free? Would that be a morally wrong action for someone to like fund their lung transplant or something like that?
Well, no, if somebody funds it, I mean,
Yeah, would it be
well,
morally wrong though? Because they're not like they've done something wrong. They should take responsibility through this like framework, right?
yeah, true, true. That's a fair point. That's
So
a
do you
fair
think it's
point.
morally wrong for people to get lung transplants if they're chain smokers?
That's such an all right. I would say no. I say, but it's like it's like okay. How do like if I answer this? It's just contradicting. It's just contradicting. It's like what can I do? It's like I have like a different framework of like mindset than like you do. My
The
stance on it
problem
is
isn't that
like
you have a different framework, Paradise. The problem is that your framework isn't internally consistent. You're arriving at conclusions that are both contradictory and things that you don't agree with. It seems like you haven't thought this through very well.
I mean, that's fair. That's the reason I just want to like came on debate because I know that I'll have to debate if I want to like get to hear the other side. I have to question myself. So that's why I chose to come on. I don't want to stay in an echo chamber where people tell me I'm right all the time. So that's why I chose to come on. Even if I look bad, I'd rather look bad and not really be able to argue over live in the same mindset I do have. But that's fair. I don't know. It's so weird. But yeah, I understand. It's like contradictory. I don't think I guess it's like the empathic side of me is like, yeah, people should have a choice in this, but it also goes against me saying that they should have this kid, and I do understand that. And it's I that's why I just personally would argue more for like I get you hate like the heartbeat bill, but I would honestly argue for that over like waiting 24 weeks or waiting like because I feel like there had to be a better middle ground than just okay, everybody can like get an abortion no matter what reason and or over it like Alabama banning it, that's ridiculous. And then it just not having any like real regulations also ridiculous. That's why I more go for the heartbeat bill because I say it gives people time to decide over being like, we should just outright ban it. That's ridiculous. But yeah, I understand.
But what you just spat out was like a jarbled mess. I didn't
I
like
mean,
understand a single
how do
thing.
I like
Like
it's
you said like we need a middle ground, even though you can't justify why you
there
believe
needs
what
a
you
middle.
do, and that like we should have a middle ground
All
because for
right,
some
dude.
reason you
I
got
you
like,
don't
dude,
have to. I mean, I get. I'm not you. I'm not gonna give you a reaction. I don't want to argue. I'm not trying to here to go get mad. That's not. That's pointless. So, but yeah, I do understand what you're saying. Like, it's fair. I. What am I supposed to do apart from that? The reason why I say because you see no matter what argument I give, you don't see that as something as a human being until it has consciousness. And when you're arguing consciousness, it's I
but
just
you don't seem to value human beings when they don't have consciousness either.
Well, I say they are still human beings. They are still human beings, whether
Or
they
do
have
you value
consciousness
a
or not.
brain dead corpse like then?
I
I
would,
feel like its
I would,
heart's still fine,
I
but
would
it's
honestly
brain dead.
value
Do
it.
you
Yeah,
value it? You think that's a
I would
human
value
life that ought to be preserved?
a human life that ought to be preserved.
Even though
Now,
it can't
if
experience
they
anything
should,
and it won't experience anything? Is that like a human
if
life
they,
to you?
if they haven't said they wanted to die, it should they people shouldn't just kill it. That's how I look at it. Even though it won't be, even though it won't be anything other again, it's kind of like a middle person. Like if I was to look at it, I would say I would want that them to have like the option of just dying because they're not gonna ever be anything ever again. But I do value human life, so I wouldn't want to just be like we should just kill everybody who like happens to lose consciousness because then that falls into
If
when I kill somebody who's in a comatose state or when I
No, but
kill
someone's
people
in a
who like.
comatose state isn't brain dead. There's a difference between those two things, at least to my
But
knowledge, right?
if
So
we're going
if
off,
we give somebody a medically induced coma and they've had a previous conscious experience and they've stated that they wanted to remain alive, right? And that we
Mhm.
know they will have another conscious experience, right? It seems to be that we ought to value the idea that the human being or that entity has expressed that it wants certain things, right? It has had the ability to express conscious preferences, and then we ought respect those for the time that it comes back.
Mhm. All right. I just like when you argue consciousness, I just think of like comatose. I don't think like brain dead's a fair stance. Yeah, that's a fair like. But I'm more arguing like if when we're arguing consciousness, I don't think it changes if they're alive or not just because they're not fully there. That's just not how I see it.
So do you again like so that would lead you to valuing like a brain dead corpse as though it was a human being? Like
It
why? Why would we value that? Like under what's your
why would we value that?
Because like you started this debate saying that you don't value that, and now you're saying you do, and it's like I don't even think you've thought this through. I just don't.
Because it was like I misunderstood your question and I gave like
How did you
and
misunderstand
I
my
missed no because
question?
the reason I misunderstood your question was because it was like I just felt because it's like a lot of contradictions. So it's sort of like if let's say let's just say for sake of like entertaining, let's say I do say we shouldn't value brain dead, like we shouldn't value the brain dead people because yeah they're not there. But then also it'd be like going against my whole argument if like we should value an embryo that's going to come to exist. It's like I would just be contradicting myself the whole debate, and it would be like again as seen it'd just be one big contradiction.
So do you think we can work in a world where we value like brain dead state? Like I'm not even gonna push back on any of this because like I just feel like I'm bullying you at this point intellectually. I don't like it's not gonna be like very fruitful discussion. It doesn't seem. So do you think like a world would work where we value brain dead human beings as though they were a human
No,
life?
no, I don't think so.
So you think the system that you've presented is unworkable?
The system I present, well, in the state of like, if they were developing, like, if they had a chance of becoming human, if they had a chance of getting their like brain back, then yeah.
No,
But
but
that's not gonna happen. You see, that's not gonna happen.
you said you value human life outside of like you'd have to value human life outside of potentiality because I've already pushed back on the potentiality argument. We've seen that it leads to two contradictory conclusions and conclusions that you don't agree with. So you have to value it outside of potentiality. So you can't use the potentiality argument to justify this. So the only thing you could say is I value human life even if it will never have a conscious experience ever again, which I don't see any reason to value. And you've already admitted to me that it wouldn't be a workable system. So I don't even know where you're going with this.
Well, then I guess I'll just concede and just take the L.
Right, dude.
Because yeah, like that's fair. I mean, I didn't come in here expecting to like own you. I didn't come in here expecting to. I just want to have a conversation. It's really the reason why I came in here. But yeah, dude. Even though you might not like me, I get that. I'm not the most likable person on Twitter, but
I
yeah, still
don't
glad to discuss it with you, dude. Still glad to
I
discuss
don't dislike anybody. I don't know people enough to even dislike them in this community.
it. Yeah, now everybody's like, you go. I say because it's sort of like, let's say if this was like if this was on my YouTube channel, people would be like, oh, Paradise is winning. So I just like either way, I can't really take it as an
You
L or
think? I
W. I
mean,
just got.
dude, you can post this to your own channel. We can like see what's going
I
on
don't.
there.
I'm fine. I'm fine. My
I'm
channel's
just
literally
like
dead, bro.
I don't
Nobody's
know.
gonna be.
I don't know who's like came into this. You could say like if I
People
had a
aren't.
YouTube
People are.
channel, people would
People are
thought that I
adding
like
me
owned
on.
you in this, but I'm not sure
Yeah.
that's the case even, dude. Like I agree with you. Like normally that's how it works, right? If me and another debate bro, we clash, like they're gonna say their audience is gonna say they own me. My audience is gonna say I own them. Like that I get, but like this is just like dude.
I know, it's just like every argument I have is like there's like a corner because I usually I'm more used to arguing like, is it a life at? It's just like a different argument. that I have to deal with because most people are not going to come into it like with this intellectual argument. So it's sort of like a new territory because most people on Twitter just, I'm sorry, they're not going to have like the greatest like heavy intellectual, like, okay, let's compare chain smokers to like, they're not going to think of that. So it's not really the argument I'm going to deal with. So I got to get more used to debating like on this type of subject.
Sure.
Yes, I will. Well, I guess I'll take the L and get bullied by Twitter for the rest of the day.
All right, dude.
See you, dude.
All right, see you, man.
Fuck Bunk. Tired of that dumbass loser. Crying in his bedroom while I'm cruising in my cruiser. This dumbass bitch, thinking that he's cool while streaming on Twitch. Call this Vietnam, we're gonna get you on a weight loss program. Everyone knows, you will never be a pro. Well, I'm putting my rap game, always tripping out, never no problems with burnout. The vids keep coming, so does the drama. Clearing your notepad, your tweets aging with a granddad. Capital of Chad, doing flips. Everyone in the chat, Bunk is a bitch. Yeah, Bunk is a bitch.